Welcome to Higher Ed Athletics. Today I'm joined by Julie Rolash, the Horizon League Commissioner. Julie, thanks for can't say that title for that much longer, but thanks for joining me on Higher Ed Athletics.
Thanks, Travis. Good to be with you.
Yeah, so it's not breaking news. It was already announced, but in October you were named the Executive Vice President of External Relations and Community Engagement with Pacer Sports and Entertainment. So you have to move all the way like 3 blocks down the
I think
street from
so,
the
right?
Horizon League offices. I'm a fan of what the Pacers have been doing lately. I think Mel Rain seems like an incredible leader, and a lot of cool things are going on with this city. And I think a lot of people know about the Pacers and Caitlin Clark, but also the Noblesville boom with a rebrand and coming from Fort Wayne, Fever building a new facility, practice facility in the area. It just seems like there's a lot of exciting stuff going on, and then you add that with Mel Raines. So was it just too great of an opportunity to pass on right now, or kind of what led to that?
You did a really nice job of summarizing all the
Everybody
exciting.
that doesn't know, the capital headquarters of Higher Ed Athletics is Indianapolis.
It's you're right. I mean, we're trying to build Indy, right, as this global epicenter of sport. And when I say we, I mean the Indiana Sports Corp released that vision last year. And since then, as you've seen, like exciting events have come to Indy, including the WNBA All-Star. So I was on the leadership board to host the WNBA All-Star game here in Indy in July. Got to work really closely with a lot of the staff from PS&E. I've known Mel for years just because of working with other events in my role with Sports Corp and the Horizon League. So when she approached me after all that, and said she'd restructured her staff. She's now been in the position for a year plus in the CEO role, obviously a long time veteran executive with PS&E. And she described the opportunity that she was thinking I would be the person to fill. I was like, okay, let's have coffee. So we talked, but I was not looking for it, Travis. I love the Horizon League. I believe in our presidents, our ADs, our student athletes. We've got great coaches. You and I were talking offline about that. Like our league is really moving in a great direction from a competitive, but also from an academic and just like a value proposition standpoint in this changing landscape. So it's not like this was an easy decision. And I got to tell you, it's still mixed emotions. I am sad to be leaving these folks who are like friends and family. And I'm also excited because I've started to have some coffees with some PS&E people and they're great people. They're fascinating. As you said, they do incredible work and impact here in the community, which to me I'm excited about. And I love basketball. So there were just all sorts of opportunities. And I thought, the Horizon League is well positioned. This is a good time for me to go. And I'm gonna take a turn at pro sports.
Yeah, it's a very well connected city, and we'll get to your sports corp role too. So I was fortunate to go to the Lucas Oil Stadium. You all invited me to go to the men and women's basketball media days. Really cool, and you wonder how in such a large building you're going to make something look really cool for basketball. But doing it in the suite, I think it was like the Touchdown Club suite, and then the people you had there. And maybe just talk about why that was. I know a lot of these schools in the Rising, you're known for like the pretty good sized cities, and bringing them to Indianapolis. What kind of was the reason for bringing them to Lucas Oil Stadium?
So there are a few pieces of play at play there. One is we started, and you're referencing, and on the eve of our media day, we started something called the Horizon Link Celebration, which is an event we've created to celebrate basketball. And we started it at Victory Field a few years ago because they have that incredible Elements enclosed suite space. And we brought in some really keynote speakers to interface with our student athletes and our coaches. And then the media day was the next day. But it was like a takeover of Victory Field, right, with the Indy skyline behind us. And then actually, that was just last year because the year before that, we kicked it off at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. And we even brought in some former Horizon League student athletes who had played professionally. So we had a Beyond the Horizon panel that our current student athletes and coaches loved. So we were at Gainbridge, Victory Field, and what's the next big iconic venue that we wanted to showcase in Indy, which is one of our major cities across our current six-state, 10-city footprint, because we've got, of course, two schools in the Metro Detroit area, soon to add Chicago with Northern Illinois joining. So, as we continue to emphasize, major cities is one of our four key pillars that we talk about a lot in the Horizon League because our student athletes get to live, play, study, travel to all these great cities. So, how do we capitalize on that? Well, one is when we bring them here for Media Day, let's create an event. So, you were there, and we, as much as a basketball league can, I think we did a takeover of an NFL stadium, which was pretty fun. It was the student athletes love seeing their logos up on the mega screen, right, on the football field. And of course, we got to go down there after the event that evening. And then the next day, we had our typical car wash of content stations that they had fun with.
Yeah, I thought it was just a really cool environment to be in and got me excited for basketball season.
Good.
And people that are watch probably I pointed out the jacket before and they can see the diplomas over here. But I am an IU Indianapolis, formerly IUPUI alum, so I'm all in on Horizon as
Your go
well. And
Jags.
yes, go Jags. And yes, and it's just a really good league. And but I kind of want to was curious. I throw out this Mount Rushmore question every once in a while. So you begin your transition out. I mean, a lot of cool things. You've been at the Horizon for over 10 years or right around 10 years before you were even the commissioner. So what is kind of on your Mount Rushmore of either great or cool things with the Horizon, either events or just initiatives?
There's been so many. I think that I've just been privileged to be a part of. I moved into the commissioner seat January 1 of 2021, which was obviously smack dab in the middle of COVID when we
Mhm.
were operating very differently. However, I think what the reason why we were able to play more games by like a 10% over the national average in terms of completion rate is because we were really unified on one, we cared most about safety, and two, we were going to make it affordable in terms of how do you play these games in the midst of a pandemic. And that to me, we just built from there in terms of league unity among our presidents, ADs, and coaches, because I think there was a reality that, hey, yeah, we're competing against each other, but as we all get better, that's only going to lift the whole league. So to get to your question, one was just frankly the success we had from still competing during COVID, but then we were able to host our 19 championships all in that spring as a staff when many conferences just said we're not going to do fall sports. And we were the lead host of all of the March Madness games in Lucas Oil Stadium, the Horizon League was. So we were basically running two courts for 3 weeks. To be able to pull that off, that's got to go somewhere on the Mount Rushmore. I don't we talk about it. We wouldn't want to do it again because it was such a mega lift,
Hmm.
but we were so in it together as a staff and league that was really rewarding. I think coming out of that was probably the second big moment, which was our mental health initiative. We recognized that people were understandably struggling in a real way. And what could we do about that? Well, we heard there's a resource need. So we approached our presidents and chancellors who were behind it from the get-go, and we allocated over $500,000 and awarded each of our member schools a $50,000 grant they had to apply for, but of course they all got. But they had to explain how they were going to use it, which forced an assessment of what's the need under that athletics tent. And a lot of it was enhanced counseling services in a more triage fashion, but some went a bit further in terms of safe spaces and things like that. Then we've been able to build on that. We're actually working on what we call mental health 3.0 right now. But to me, that was showing that we care way beyond, off the court, so to speak. And then I think probably the third was our net rank on the men's side was 27, and that's like the magic NCAA metric that's used to seed our teams when it comes to Selection Sunday. They'll say it's a factor, but it's a dominant factor. Well, conference wise, we were 27th out of 32, which wasn't very good 4 or 5 years ago. We put together a 5-point strategy, got buy-in from presidents, ADs, and coaches, which is took a while.
Yeah.
And just last year, we had climbed to 19. And that's been like a bit of a grind, obviously, but our coaches bought into scheduling our tournament, our television strategy, like all of those pieces that matter because there's no silver bullet. And we are obviously getting better. You saw that with Oakland winning over Kentucky. I don't say upset, but I guess for some might use that. But given
People in Kentucky will say that.
they will, but given they almost beat NC State 2 days later, it's hard to call the first one an upset, right? Um, but that, as Greg Campy has said, the night they played Kentucky, they were just as good as them. The night they played NC State, they were just as good as them. And over the course of that season, there were seven other teams because we were about eight deep that year that like legit. And he said, we had seven other teams in this league that were just as good as us. Like we are moving in the right direction. And to me, that was a defining moment of, all right, we're turning the corner.
Yeah, and then I told you before hitting record, I was watching the Oakland versus Purdue game when Purdue has won. 3 minutes left. It's a 6 point game or a 4 point game, and then Purdue
Right.
hits three transition threes in a row and pulls away. So if you look at the final score, even it dropped them out of the number one ranking because they didn't blow a Horizon League team away or something. And then IU Indianapolis, drops 100 plus on Ohio State and Columbus to start the season, and just sending shockwaves. So it's an exciting time for the league,
It
and
is.
I think that was four. I wasn't keeping track for Mount Rushmore. I think it was.
Okay, you gave me a fourth there. Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
there we
take
go.
it.
So I did see on the LinkedIn post said, quote, work continues behind the scenes with our congressional strategy supporting the Horizon League and our coalition of 10 mid-major conferences, the Tenacious 10. So for those unaware, can you talk about the origin story of this group and then what the strategy is for the 10 mid-major conferences right now with Congress?
Okay, maybe that's the fourth on Mount Rushmore. So thank you for that
Good
segue.
transition. Yes, there we
We
go.
this was probably a year ago at this point. Maybe a little, maybe it was early 2025, so close to that. I was talking with President Johnson, President Bill Johnson at Youngstown State. He was a U.S. congressman.
Hmm.
He stepped down in January of 2024 to accept the presidency at Youngstown State, so stepped down from his congressional seat. Obviously, that's pretty unique, doesn't happen. So, and he had been in Congress for over 10 years. So he obviously brought a wealth of experience. And as the momentum starts to really pick up, I would say on a federal level in terms of the potential for congressional intervention with college sports, I had talked with him about the need for the mid majors to have representation in DC because, as you know, you got to be there as it's happening as opposed to after the fact because then it's already made. He agreed and he said we do need to do that, and here's the right firm to work with, which is Align Strategies. And I invited him then to join our group of 22 commissioners. We meet pretty regularly. So he joined on a Zoom. I introduced him and I just asked him to talk about why we need our own representation because the Power Four has theirs, both independent and collective. The NCAA has their lobbyist firms. But the real question was who's representing our interests because we have some shared interests, but then we have some distinctive interests. And the answer was nobody. So President Johnson explained that in pretty clear terms to our group of 22, and a phrase he shared that was picked up in the SBJ article that was done on our efforts quoted him as saying, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu."
Yeah, I
I
like that
don't,
when I saw that in the ticker. I was like,
I
that's
don't think
awesome.
there's a better soundbite, and I think he's right. So after his presentation, I had already, I think, convinced a handful to be a part of a coalition, but that's when our number climbed to 10. And a couple other conferences already have representation and they wanted to stay the course on their end. Others just for whatever reason chose not to engage. But we got up to 10, which is almost half, obviously, of the 22. And more importantly, we have over 100 Division I institutions represented, a very high number of states represented. So through that, we were able to start to make some noise, candidly, with Congress, and that we had some interests that were different. And when the NCAA passed a governance structure that was even more imbalanced in August, relative to giving so much more authority to the Power Four, they also essentially said after 5 years, the Power Four can change what it means to be a Division I member, and the four of them can do it if they can agree, and the rest of us could be voted off the island, so to speak. So that those two issues were high on our list. And we weren't like trying to relitigate them in Congress, but we were seeking some protections. And that got the attention of the A4. And we were able to reach an agreement offline, not through federal legislation, to provide more membership protections for all of Division One so that we can't simply be voted off if the four of them agree on changing those standards in 5 years. And then they also agreed to hold the line on where we are from a representation percentage standpoint. So as Congress may require more student athlete representation, which might very well happen if the SCORE Act passes and goes through the Senate, we will ensure at least where we are today, which is around that 35% threshold. So I think it was two wins from our standpoint. And now we're still engaged because we've got some key senators who come from states within our coalition, including South Dakota with Senator Thune that leads, obviously, is majority whip. So we've got some. We still have some work to do, but we're really well positioned.
That's awesome. You mentioned the meetings with the commissioners when you all, I've only had, I think, you might only be the second commissioner I've had on the podcast ever. It's usually athletic directors, sometimes presidents. But just kind of share like how often, I know you shared how often, but what do you all kind of talk about when the commissioners are together from all those leagues?
We meet in person a couple times a year, and then there's usually quarterly virtual meetings outside of that. I mean, a lot of the national issues primarily happening at the NCAA level affect all of us in some way, not the same, not equally by any means. So there are pretty heavy, I would say, NCAA items and staff, and it's pretty heavy from like an NCAA staff member joining us, presenting, having dialogue about issues. And I think it's even become more clear, like that basketball is what unites us across the 32. So if you were to look at the types of issues we're talking about, it relates to basketball for the most part.
Yeah, I didn't know if you'd have to like go into that represent if you're representing all your presidents and athletic directors' opinions, or you're just kind of going in there and sharing information and then taking it back to your league, or I'm sure there's a little bit of both.
It's a little bit of both. And I mean, there's very healthy discussions that happen, debate, disagreement, uh, in the formal meeting room, at the coffee table, at dinner. So it's important to keep those relationships strong so that when we do disagree on how are the house damages going to be paid, um, there were a lot of us, and myself and the summit commissioner were leading that charge of we did not think that that was equitable in terms of how the NSA and the Power Four decided to withhold distributions from all of us to pay the back damages on house. That was a pretty significant topic on those agendas
I
for
can imagine.
a long period of time. So I mean, it's meaty issues that as it should be.
So let's stick with the conference commissioner role. So what does it take to be an effective conference commissioner in your opinion? Because I'm not sure that many really even understand what the commissioner's responsibility is. But you've kind of laid out a lot of that just now. So what does it take to be an effective one?
I mean, I think like the soft skills, if you will, some diplomacy, because I think really effective commissioners, one, you got to be aligned with the presidents and chancellors. They're the board of directors with fiduciary responsibility for every conference. So I have really intentionally built, and I'm privileged to work for like seriously 11 really good people who have tough jobs leading there for them. You know, we have nine public universities, two privates, and that higher ed is not getting any easier, as you know, and they are doing phenomenal jobs doing that while also giving me oversight in terms of operating the Horizon League. So you got to have alignment with them and the athletics directors because talk about tough jobs, like those are not getting any easier in this changing landscape, in particular at our level to still compete nationally, which we're doing with sometimes a scarcity of resources. So understanding what are their issues, what can we unite on, and then how can we help? Like I've always viewed it as we're here to lift, support, create a unifying vision. And then at the end of the day, you got to do a really good job running the core operations, which are 19 championships, and that has to be a pinnacle experience for our student athletes. You got to manage the media rights because the schools give us their media rights to go negotiate a deal, then we can give back some of those rights, but you got to do your best to capitalize on that on behalf of the schools. And then you got to use that to really build exposure which ties into the pillar of content and communications and strategy. That's why we redid the Horizon League logo a few years ago. That was part of a larger effort of we need to build more pride in what it means to be in the Horizon League, both visually, that to me is a small part of it, but what are we saying? Like you asked about major cities, major impact, major moves, major experiences. So it's really being that advocate, but also I think helping people, frankly, feel pride that they're part of this league. The smaller part, but it's still a really significant part, is you got to work on retention of your current members and then constantly cultivating potential new members. And that has to happen quietly and confidentially, but you got to have your pulse on how committed are your current members relative to overall health and stability of your league. And then should you have attrition or if there's a desire for growth, who's on your short list? And that takes time and energy and effort too, because you got to go meet these people where they are and understand who might be a candidate, what's their demographic, their makeup, their financial picture look like. Um, and then the other part is like this has become an increasing role for me is obviously the NCAA front, first with the house damages, and then we talked about the lobbying effort. Because of President Johnson, I was asked to take a lead with that. Not every commissioner needs to or does, but we've been able to make an impact. And the board has really valued that. And I think they want to make sure the next commissioner continues to lead at the national level.
Yeah, and I mean you would be the person to do that with your background. So I mean you had worked in NCAA national office and then leading enforcement, and then I also want to talk about you in between kind of this transition. You co-founded the college sports law practice. I'm going to say the letters because I'll mess up the name, but CCH+A, and we're able to serve in a role with the firm while still being the commissioner. This is another impressive group in the college athletic space, and then overall the same firm. I was on a school board in Plainfield for a couple years, and our lawyer was from that firm, and she was great. I just kind of want to talk. Can you maybe talk about the growth of that firm from a sports law perspective? Because the talent there is incredible. I worked with some of them with Title IX stuff in previous athletic department roles, but it's really just seemed to grow after COVID too. It kind of took off with everything.
Well, I am privileged to be of counsel with CCHA. I was a co-founder of their sports law practice when I left the NCAA. Kelly Fagan was actually a law extern for me at the NCAA, and she was a bright star then, and then graduated top of her class from IU McKinney, was an associate with CCHA, and then approached me and said, I'd like to start a sports law practice. The firm's behind me. I need someone with a bit more experience in the space. And I was thrilled she reached out because I had started my own consulting firm. So the timing worked to merge that with CCHA and bring some of my clients over. And we've grown it from the two of us to you probably have the head count better than me right now
I feel
because
like it's
we've got
over 10 now.
yes, we've got associates, partners, we have some consultants. Um, and we've really sports law, as you know, has really broadened. So it started out heavy on the NCAA side and we still do some of that work, but now it's really broad consulting with Title IX. There's also significant work employment contracts in the sports space. And then our education law group that we partner with quite a bit, as you noted, they do incredible work throughout the state, representing so many different school districts that there's some overlap there. And then even there's been, I call it a cultural audit almost, but you have student athletes or others raising concerns. That's not an NCAA issue, but you need somebody to come in with experience as to how to conduct an assessment or inquiry to provide peace of mind to the athletics director or president or chancellor that there's a earnest look at what the issues are within a program. So I've really enjoyed being able to stay involved, obviously with the blessing of the Horizon League Board of Directors to do so. And I've definitely moved more from the practicing role to an advisor role.
Yeah. Well, and then not to make it sound like you have 10 jobs, but I do also want to ask about the Indiana Sports Corp. So it's always been a game changer for this city and this state. When I was an undergrad, we always volunteered at the Sports Corp Challenge, which is awesome. Basically, back then we would do it on the campus. Now I know it's at like Indianapolis Motor Speedway a lot of times, but just it brings championship experiences here. And then I think most in college athletics would remember them for helping put on the NCAA men's basketball tournament that you had talked about. in a bubble, essentially, was what it was. But you are the chairperson of the ISC board, and so can you talk about how that team, this city is, how are they so successful at bringing events to the city of Indianapolis?
Well, I mean, I think it starts with one, the staff knows how to execute events, whether it's the Super Bowl, a Final Four, building pools in Lucas Oil Stadium to host the USA Swim Trials, or hosting, to your point, Corporate Challenge, which is for the corporate community here in Indianapolis, right? And by the way, the Horizon League participates in that every year, and we have a blast out at the track. So there's just we have to be second to none when it comes to just operational effectiveness and efficiencies. On top of that, there is this huge army of volunteers, like to your point, and I've talked with people from other cities, and I would say like similar cities from a size and resource standpoint. They do not have the thousands upon thousands of volunteers in a database that they can call on. And we experienced that in the Horizon Link with a local organizing committee, people who are team hosts, and the sports volunteer culture in our city, again, is second to none. And that allows us, we call it, you hear the phrase Hoosier hospitality. I call it like the spirit. I think there's a spirit here that people really embody when it comes to the secret sauce of hosting these events. And then, a huge factor that the state gave us is this Indy Bid Fund. So $10 million every 2 years can be appropriated for the Sports Corp to use and or award to bring these events here. Because of that, we have a legacy partnership with WWE. Because of that, we've been able to extend the Big Ten. Because of that, we are bringing back USA Swim Trials. Like that bid fund has frankly positioned Sports Corp to go after the even bigger and better events that but for that fund we wouldn't be able to do. So I think it's all three of those. And I would note, and I don't say this because I'm on the board to sound self-serving, but I've been on the board now since, I don't know, it was probably what, 7 years. Those board members are so committed and really show up. I've served on a lot of boards, and those board members really care deeply because they understand sports is an economic engine and a unifying point for our city and state.
Yeah, and just for those listening, some events that there have been, Julie had mentioned the WWE, the Big Ten football championship is always at Lucas Oil, which my Hoosiers will probably be in a couple of weeks, hopefully. And then the U.S. swim Olympic swim trials. I mean, who puts giant Olympic-sized pools, like multiple pools, into a football stadium? Very cool. And I think it was like the first time it had been done, at least in America. So really,
Right.
really great things that are going on. And then the city's going to be hosting the women's national championship for basketball. I think everybody's in the city is like, when are we going to get a Super Bowl again? But those that remember 2012, I remember I was a bellman at the Sheraton Hotel in college and
That's great.
got to see some really cool people and drive some really cool cars. But people also don't realize we lucked out with the weather big time back then. It's the game's in February. It's not great in Indianapolis, and we had like 50-degree temperatures. So I do think like Indianapolis is known as a convention city.
Hmm.
The convention center connects to Lucas Oil Stadium, which is really really helpful. But yeah, I've been kind of studying these versions of Indiana Sports Corps. Like different cities can call them different things. But so I recently interviewed Rob Higgins, who's now the CEO of athletics at University of South Florida. He had a 20-year run. You probably know who he is.
Oh,
20
sure.
year
Yeah.
20-year run as the Tampa
Mhm.
Sports Commission director. And he caps his time there by like getting announced another Super Bowl. So good for him, I guess. But there's a lot of talk about college athletics, like outsiders coming into athletic director roles. And he was a natural fit for USF because he was an alum there and he had worked in athletics there. But it did make me think. Like I do videos of predicting like what I think candidate profiles should look like. And I did predict Rob, but it was also a very obvious one for USF. But one thing I'm now doing is in certain cities, you almost have to see, is there a sports commission executive director that's been successful at bringing events and revenue? Because really think if you think about what the modern day athletic director is supposed to be doing, they don't just run their athletic department anymore. They also need to be creative with revenue. And then if you can bring new events, like I'm sure Luke will be trying to get, concerts and smaller events at that new arena that's propping up at IU Indy. But that role of a sports director, it really could fit like the modern day athletic director. So does that make sense to you? Like any skill set you think like I'm not advocating for Patrick Talty to go be an AD anywhere from this. He's doing great things at the sports corp. But it does seem like that is maybe some similar roles, and you're also working with politics, and you're also running a staff with big stakes.
There are definitely transferable skills, as you note, in particular, as you think about how do you maximize revenue, like from events and from all facets of what could come from those events. So certainly there's some overlap, transferable skills. I think as we were also talking offline, like a key piece that an athletics director has to do, especially with the pressures of football and men's and women's basketball at the Power Four level, they got to know how to hire great coaches. And that's not always a transferable skill, I would suggest.
Mhm.
And I've not had to hire a profile coach. I've just talked to a lot of athletic directors who have, in the process they go through. I think there's going to be a learning curve for anyone and I was speaking with a search firm this morning who does a lot of work in pro sports, and they were talking about how more folks from pro sports are looking at collegiate jobs, to your point, for I think the reasons we agree. There's a huge transferable skill set. I think there's also some skill sets, or maybe it's just experiences that those who have been raised through college sports bring to the table that might give them an edge. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't hire, the fresh look from the outside, but I really see, and the easy one is Scott Dolson and what he's done at Indiana, and he obviously has had his career there and has been able to really make extraordinary coaching hires while also, I think, hitting it out of the park when it comes to revenue generation.
Yeah, and for those that aren't aware, like Scott was, he doesn't put himself out there nationally a lot, like on podcasts and stuff. Maybe I'll try to get him on mine now that I don't work for him. But what's interesting is, yes, he studies coaching searches, and then I think he relies heavily on his staff too. But it also comes with the leadership of President Witten. She's a huge,
Right,
knowledgeable sports person. But also going back to knowing when to extend someone like Terry Morin, and Fred Glass famously told me on the podcast that he had like put like a $1 million buyout specifically to Purdue so that she couldn't go and be because she played at Purdue. And
right,
so, yeah, I think he learned along the way of how to be strategic with some of that, like what Fred had taught him too. So I agree. So I've asked, this comes up a lot when I'm talking to ADs, young and new, about what does it look like. I had the chief of staff of Kent State on, the president's chief of staff, that just came out earlier this month. And I talked similar about that because I think another learning curve is an outsider might not know how universities work, how a college campus works, the political side of it, and what the role of an athletic director is on the cabinet, and the coaching one is another big aspect. I mean, you can do things by committee, but at the end of the day, you have to be the one that makes the hire. And so I think it's a really good point and Rob, the day after he was kind of buttoned up in the interview, so like because he's new at the job, but it's funny, it's like the day after I post that it's announced he has to make a basketball coach hire like right before the season. And I was like, oh, now he's going to because that was one of my concerns is, okay, knows a lot of people, everybody loves him. What about if his football coach leaves and he's got well, now he brings in Derek Brooks to be his COO. So I do think that one thing external people, they have to build a team around them of people that get it.
right,
And if you're an up and coming administrator, you need to figure out how the pro side of it works. And so I think
right,
it's going to be like everybody's going to kind of rise to the top with their different experiences. But I think it's going to be hard work for search firms too, is like trying to find like the real person in the candidate, not just looking at the resume. And I think institutional fit is going to be even more critical. So I went on a little tangent there on my own. I'm supposed to be the one asking the questions, I know, but
all good points.
well, so we're going to wrap up with a couple more going back to commissioner and Horizon League things. So Northern Illinois is taking this creative approach to conference realignment.
Mhm.
So I just spent some time with Sean Frazier when I was at Toledo for the Toledo NIU Maction game, and we talked about this, and he's on the podcast too that will come out after this episode. So they are sending their football program to Mountain West, and then he really wanted to get strategic about keeping a regional mindset with several other sports. So Can you talk about the process of NIU joining? You talked about how you had to, always keep a pulse of like outgoing and potential incoming members. So what was that process like for NIU? And do you think this is going to be a strategy that maybe more people do that have football programs?
Well, in terms of like the process, as it always starts, usually with the athletic director, president, and myself having conversations about potential opportunity and then alignment. And they obviously are strong in football. And as we talked, we are strong in basketball. And if they wanted to potentially be a part of the Horizon League, they had to make that same commitment from an investment standpoint. They're already there from a facility standpoint, but they had to get there from an investment standpoint, both in terms of overall financial, but that includes NIL. And we talked about that. They were a very attractive candidate for multiple reasons. You think about and are obviously geography matters for our league when you see we're a pretty tight six-state footprint. And that's important because the more spread out you are, that does impact student athletes and their experience and their travel and the associated costs with it. So they were certainly within our geographic domain. There was major academic alignment when you look at they're an R2 institution knocking the door on R1, and their campus, their size, their current funding, similar to our public institutions. And so that matters as you might expect, especially when you're talking to presidents and chancellors. And then where are they? They're, that you can't see the Chicago skyline from their campus, but they are considered Chicagoland market. And that's really attractive to a lot of our schools who obviously recruit students from that area to be able to be going back there to compete. So there were a lot of positives. And through the conversations I was having with them, then there was clear that there was alignment. And so then that's at that point, then you start to introduce them to presidents, chancellors, and then it culminates with a more formal presentation engagement with presidents, chancellors, and ADs, and then we're able to negotiate their entry.
Yeah, I can't remember if I talked to Sean specifically about this, but I imagine the football decision came first, and then it's like, well, wait, we can't, based on the strategy he was thinking, it was like, we have to be regional budget for everything else. So we can't take everyone to the Mountain West. And so I imagine that's when the outreach is of like, hey, we're doing this, and then we're looking, to try and stay local. And the footprint, I have the world map here. On the other room, I have a USA map that I use. I have my kids kind of practice here in my home office, but my golden doodle is laying right in front of it, and so he's snoring, so I won't put him on camera. But we talk about these things, as silly as it sounds, is when a kid, like when a team is playing on TV, my 9-year-old will ask me on the map, "Where's that school at?" And like it does matter, He'll ask
Yeah.
me when we're playing NCAA football on Xbox, like, "Where's this school at?" And so as these kids grow up and they start
Mhm.
playing sports and they become fans and they consider college, that's a huge aspect of it. And I don't think it's as something that people really think about how important the regional focus is for a place like Horizon, for teams to travel partners and things like that. I know from working at University of Indianapolis for 4 years, we were the GMAC or GLVC. Sorry, someone's going to be really mad at me for saying GMAC. The GLVC, that footprint is very similar to the Horizon, and so I do
Mhm.
know that it matters. So yeah, I think it's an interesting strategy that I wonder if we're going to see more football school decisions that then other sports kind of come up with a regional that makes sense. Do you think that's something that might keep happening?
I don't know if it will, but I certainly I like it. I mean, I applaud Sean for his innovative approach to this because football is different. They play once a week, so it's
It's only
okay.
usually 5 away games.
That's right. It's okay to travel because then it's usually on the weekend. So, when you think about actually caring about class time and travel impact on your student athletes, I think he recognized, coupled with the exposure opportunity that he's going to be able to gain by being a part of the Mountain West football effort, that makes sense. While asking the rest of his teams to travel in the midst of that footprint, that does not make sense. And so I credit him for thinking differently and not I think the playbook of it's an all or nothing proposition. And I credit Gloria Navarez, the commissioner of the Mountain West. I think she's definitely an outside the box thinker. And she and I, of course, talked during the process. I mean, but I give credit to Sean Frazier and President Freeman, who's a really well-respected academic leader, and in terms of their approach to what's a holistic way to think about this.
Yeah, and then for the kudos to the Mountain West to also not just be thinking football because they go and they have Grand Canyon join. And Jamie Boggs was on the podcast in October or on Halloween, I think, to talk about that. And obviously they're not a football school, but they are now in the Mountain West and probably going to be very successful in basketball as well, I would say, with the Havocs. So to kind of end it, what words of encouragement or advice will you leave for the next commissioner? Either on this podcast if they're watching. I don't know if it's been announced yet what the process is going to be, but just kind of what would your words of advice be for really any commissioner, but specifically for the Horizon League?
Well, I think first is the Horizon League is it's all about the people. I mean, we have some tremendous people. It starts in our office. Then you go to our campuses. It starts at the president's level, ADs, coaches, student athletes, campus administrators. This is such a wonderful league. And I think like the next leader, I'm already happy for him or her because they're walking into what I think is an incredibly terrific opportunity. And the league's well positioned for growth. And I think a fresh look will bring some innovation, which will be exciting. I look forward to seeing the next chapter of the league. But I think, as you and I know, at the end of the day, it's all about the people. I mean, and been a privilege to work in college sports because we really are making an impact. And I'm here to cheer for and help support in any way I can the next leader.
Well, Julie Rolash, I think for the higher ed athletics audience, this is kind of the exit stage left, but I look forward to seeing the work that you do continue in this city, the city that I know we both love for the sports and for the people. It's a great environment to be in. So I'm excited for your next chapter
Thank you.
and best of luck with the Pacer Sports and Entertainment. And thanks for joining me on Higher Ed Athletics. We had this scheduled before the news with Sean before he had left. So just thanks for keeping it on the schedule
Of course.
and still talking about Horizon League.
Happy to do it. Thanks, Travis.